Imagine, like, just for a second, that you're sitting in this really smoky cafe in Tangier.
Oh, yeah. This is in the late 1950s, right?
Exactly, late 1950s. The room is totally packed. You've got glasses of hot mint tea clinking everywhere. And there's this guy in the center of the room just spinning this wild, completely improvised story.
Right. Something about witchcraft or revenge, maybe survival.
Yeah. It's dynamic, it's chaotic, and it's completely alive. But now imagine trying to trap that living, breathing, chaotic moment inside the flat pages of a printed book.
Oh, man, that's tough.
Right. Like, how do you do that without totally killing its soul?
Yeah.
And that is our mission for you today. Welcome to our deep dive into a really fascinating scholarly article by Eunice Escher and Sassan Mala Hussein. It's called From Voice to Text, Untranslated Orality in Paul Bowles' Moroccan Collaborations.
And it's a pretty monumental challenge they're analyzing here. I mean, You're looking at the collision of two completely different worlds. You've got the ancient, really fluid tradition of Moroccan oral storytelling, crashing right into the rigid, highly structured world of Western literary publishing.
I always think about this like a cover song.
Okay, yeah. How so?
Well, usually when a recording artist covers a track, the whole point is to translate it for a completely new audience. You take a gritty, chaotic, underground punk anthem and you smooth it out into this nice coffee shop acoustic ballad.
Right. You make it clean. You make it recognizable for the mainstream.
Exactly. But what if the original song is incredible specifically because of its weird time signatures? What if you actually want to keep those raw, unpolished vocals?
Oh, I see. If you smooth all of that out, you haven't just translated the song. You basically erased the exact thing that made it special.
Yes. And that tension right there is the core of what we're unpacking today.
And to really grasp that tension, we have to look at the backdrop first. Because Tangier in the mid-20th century was an international zone.
Right. It wasn't just run by one government.
No, it was jointly governed by multiple European powers. So it became this incredibly complex, multilingual melting pot. And for American writers, specifically the Beat Generation guys, like Jack Kerouac and William Burroughs' Tangier, was basically a playground.
Oh, for sure. It offered a total escape from Western conformity.
Exactly. It was this heavily romanticized hub for artistic and social experimentation.
And right in the middle of this bohemian playground, you have our catalyst, which is Paul Bowles.
Right.
He was an American expatriate, a trained composer, a poet, and, a very established fiction writer. But he noticed something pretty tragic happening around the late 1950s.
Yeah, that rich cafe storytelling culture we just pictured, it was dying out.
Rapidly.
I mean, the Moroccan state was expanding radio and television, and Bowles literally documented how these cafes began bringing in TV sets.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were taking all the chairs and rearranging them to face the screen instead of facing each other. So the whole communal aspect of the cafe was just being reformatted for passive consumption.
That's so sad. And on top of witnessing this whole cultural shift, Bowles was also dealing with a massive personal crisis.
Right, with his wife.
Yeah. His wife, the brilliant author Jane Bowles, suffered a really debilitating stroke in 1957. She was left with severe visual impairment and aphasia.
Which is just heartbreaking.
It really is. And the immense emotional toll, plus the day-to-day burden of her care, it effectively brought Bowles' own fiction writing to a complete halt. He needed a lifeline.
You needed a way to remain connected to language and narrative, right? But without having to invent it all from scratch.
Exactly. So he turned his focus outward. He started recording and translating the local storytellers of Tangier.
Which immediately plunges us into some incredibly complex ethical territory.
Oh, absolutely.
Because whenever you have a prominent, highly educated Western expatriate recording, marginalized, impoverished, and often illiterate local storytellers, you are creating an extreme power dynamic.
Yeah, and we absolutely have to address this elephant in the room before we even get into the stories themselves. This whole cross-cultural collaboration sparked a massive academic debate about power and authorship.
Right.
And for you listening, we want to be exceptionally clear here. We are totally impartial. We are not taking a side.
Completely impartial. We're just presenting the historical friction.
Right, because you just cannot fully understand these texts without understanding the controversy surrounding them.
Yeah, and the critical responses are deeply, deeply polarized. So on one side of the debate, you have critics like Abdelkader Sabil, and he argues that Bowles basically just exploited the financial vulnerability and the illiteracy of these storytellers.
Because they couldn't read the final English translations. Right?
Exactly. The argument is that they had zero editorial agency.
Yeah.
And then Tahar Ben Jaloun, who is this highly respected francophone Moroccan writer, he went so far as to condemn the resulting work as literature bâtarde.
Bastard literature. That's a heavy critique.
It's very heavy. He essentially accused Bowles of commodifying Moroccan voices, like turning informants into props that were tailored specifically to entertain a Western gaze.
Wow. But then you have scholars on the completely opposite side of the debate, like Karim Bajid and Hafida Morad.
Right, and they have a very different take.
They do. Their argument is that Bowles was actually engaging in a form of activist mediation. They point out that he amplified and preserved these voices that the modernized Moroccan state was like actively ignoring.
Voices that would have just been completely lost to history otherwise.
Exactly. And then you get perspectives like Alan Hibbert's, who calls the whole thing a mutual exploitation.
I like that phrase, mutual exploitation.
Yeah, because Bowles gained literary output and cultural capital during a time when he couldn't write his own stuff, while the storytellers gained, unprecedented material benefit and global exposure.
So it's this fraught, super complicated web of agency and power. But regardless of where scholars land on that spectrum, the texts themselves do exist.
They do.
And the way Bowles chose to create them brings us to this really foundational concept in postcolonial translation theory, which is the idea of untranslatability.
Okay, let's unpack this, because untranslatability, it honestly sounds like an oxymoron.
How so?
Well, if a book is translated and printed in English, how is it untranslatable? Like, it's right there in English.
Right. Well, in this context, it doesn't mean that a specific Arabic or Darija word literally cannot find an English equivalent.
Okay.
Untranslatability is a deliberate stylistic refusal. It's a refusal to domesticate a text into fluent, standard, easy-to-read Western prose.
Okay, I have to push back on that a little bit. Isn't the entire goal of translation to make a book easy for the target audience to read?
That's the assumption, yeah.
Like, if I buy a translated novel, I want to be immersed in the story. I don't want to be tripping over clunky grammar. If the translation is deliberately disorienting, doesn't that defeat the whole purpose of publishing a book?
Well, that is the standard Western expectation. But postcolonial theorists argue that prioritizing fluency is actually a subtle form of cultural violence.
Wait, violence? Really?
Yeah. I mean, think about what happens when you force a chaotic oral performance into strict literary grammar. You delete the repetitive phrases, you impose these rigid paragraph structures.
You smooth out the pacing.
Exactly. And in doing so, you completely erase the cultural nuance, the original rhythm, and the political weight of the actual performance.
Oh, wow.
So untranslatability asks the reader to pause and dwell on the unfamiliarity. It forces you to adapt to the storyteller's culture, rather than forcing the storyteller to adapt to yours.
Ah, I see. So it's keeping those weird time signatures of the song we talked about earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Even if the new audience finds it hard to dance to at first. So what does this linguistic rebellion actually look like on the page?
To really see the mechanics of it, we look at Bowles' first major collaboration. This was with a storyteller named Ahmed Yacoubi, and Yacoubi's tales were born entirely out of wild, surreal improvisation. Bowles noted that his stories were so spontaneous and complex that they could never be repeated the same way twice.
Which makes recording them a nightmare, I'm sure.
Oh, totally, because they didn't even have a sophisticated recording setup early on. Bowles literally had to seize a notebook and just scramble to scribble down English translations in real time as Yacoubi was speaking.
That sounds incredibly stressful, capturing a live performance on the fly like that.
It was. But the resulting story, The Night Before Thinking, it perfectly captures that frenetic energy. It's this dramatic fantasy tale following a woman named Rakasa.
Oh, this story is wild. Rakasa is seeking revenge on this man named Hakim because he killed her brother.
Right.
And her grand plan for revenge is to trick Hakim into marrying her.
A very dramatic premise.
Yeah.
But what makes the text so revolutionary is how Bowles preserved the orality of Yacoubi's delivery.
Okay, how did he do that?
Well, in a traditional Western novel, you rely heavily on typographic conventions, specifically quotation marks, to separate what a character says from what the narrator is describing.
Sure. Or what a character is just thinking to themselves.
Exactly. But Bowles intentionally removed quotation marks from the translation entirely.
Wait, like none at all?
None. Speech, physical description, and the narrator's voice, it all just merges into one continuous stream.
That sounds really confusing.
It is. The pronouns shift rapidly within a single breath. He's bouncing between he, she, I, and you. It creates this profound narrative disorientation for the reader.
But why drop the punctuation? Like, how does that actually honor the culture?
Because in a cafe, when a storyteller is performing, there are no quotation marks hovering in the air.
Oh,
The
right.
storyteller embodies all the characters simultaneously. The boundary between the narrator's mind and the character's voice is completely permeable in a live performance.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, by removing the visual cues on the page,
Hmm.
the reader is forced to listen to the cadence of the text to figure out who is speaking. It mimics the experience of actually being a live audience member.
And that emotional whiplash, it bleeds right into the plot, too. Like,
Yeah.
there is this deeply bizarre, darkly comedic scene in this story.
Oh, the baby scene.
Yes. Rakasa and Hakim are having an argument, and suddenly, out of nowhere, Rakasa gives birth to a baby girl. But the child is completely surreal.
Yeah, the physical description of the baby is just pure, untrammeled imagination.
It is. The text describes the baby as having 9 fingers on one hand and only 1 finger on the other.
And the feet, too.
Yeah. One foot has 10 toes, and the other foot has 0 toes, which is horrifying.
It really is.
But Hakim looks at this incredibly surreal, terrifying situation, starts laughing, and simply says, "This is a good marriage."
Right. He just accepts it.
And then they just casually pivot to discussing how they will probably have to sell their children to pay for things. It's so jarring.
It's definitely shocking to a Western reader who expects, psychological realism. But this is a hallmark of Moroccan folk humor. Absurdity is used as a deliberate device to provoke the audience.
Kind of to expose emotional dissonance.
Exactly. And Bowles preserves this unpredictable cultural cadence, not just in the plot, but in the sentence structure itself.
How so?
The prose relies heavily on repetitive conjunctions. You'll see words like and, 3, and 1 repeated rhythmically over and over.
It creates a very staccato rhythm, right?
Yes, because it mimics the Arabic conjunction wa, which translates to and.
Yeah.
In English literary editing, you're usually taught to vary your sentence structures and avoid starting every sentence with and.
Right. My high school English teacher would have failed me for that.
Same. But in Moroccan oral speech, wa is a structural pillar. It's used to maintain momentum and keep the audience hooked. Bowles kept the repetitive ands to preserve that driving, breathless pacing.
So untranslatability is clearly a fantastic tool for capturing this wild, surreal fantasy. But here's where it gets really interesting. Refusing to sanitize the text wasn't just a trick for fantasy.
Oh, not at all.
When the stakes shifted to literal life and death, that exact same linguistic rawness became a vital tool for survival. Which brings us to our next storyteller, Larbi Layachi.
Right, and the contrast here is just crucial. We mentioned earlier that the beat writers viewed Tangier as a bohemian playground.
Yeah.
But that exoticization created a massive blind spot regarding the local reality. For Moroccan locals like Layachi, Tangier wasn't a playground at all. It was marked by extreme poverty, social exclusion, and just this desperate cycle of day labor.
Yeah, Layachi's reality was brutal, and he documented this in a grim autobiographical account called A Life Full of Holes.
Which is just a devastating title.
It is. He famously explained that a life full of holes means a life full of nothing but waiting.
Wow. And because his story was so real, exposing systemic corruption, the brutality of the jail systems, and the severe decay of Moroccan society, it was politically dangerous.
Very dangerous.
Layachi actually had to publish the book under a pseudonym, Driss bin Hamed Charhadi, just to protect himself from state backlash and censorship.
And way he tells his story is so completely different from Yacoubi's fantasy. It is deeply rooted in this tactile realism.
Extremely tactile. I mean, oral storytelling relies heavily on sensory appeal to ground the listener.
Yeah.
There's a specific anecdote in his story at Mustafa's Cafe that illustrates this perfectly. Layachi describes working this grueling job carrying heavy crates of prickly pears.
The Hindiats.
Right, the Hindiats.
Yeah.
He carries these heavy baskets on his shoulders across the city. And the text describes how, without him even realizing it at first, these unseen tiny cactus needles are constantly shaking loose from the crates.
I know where this is going.
Yeah, they fall down the back of his neck, and they painfully lodge themselves deep into his skin as he sweats.
That makes my skin crawl just thinking about it. It's such a visceral image of invisible, painful labor.
It really is.
It reminds me of the unseen physical toll of modern gig economy workers today. You know, like the wear and tear on the body that nobody else sees.
That's a great comparison. And that precision of movement, that focus on the physical toll of labor, it requires a specific kind of translation.
How did Bowles handle that?
Bowles honors it by keeping the language elemental practical, and totally unadorned. He resists any urge to embellish the suffering with, like, pretty poetic Western prose.
Right, no flowery metaphors.
Exactly. The continuous stream of unpunctuated dialogue makes you feel like Layachi is sitting right next to you, just unloading his exhausted memory.
But we shouldn't confuse that raw, elemental language with a lack of sophistication. Layachi wasn't just rambling off the top of his head into a microphone.
Oh, definitely not. He was a master of structure.
He really was.
There's this fascinating moment during the recording process that proves this. Layachi actually asked Bowles to play the tape back for him from the very beginning. Okay. And halfway through listening to his own recording, Layachi suddenly calls out, "Please stop the machine. Here, I want to tell something more."
Wow.
Yeah. He deliberately halted the playback to insert a brand new sequence right in the middle of the narrative, specifically to give the overarching piece a more realistic sense of the passage of time.
That is incredible. It's exactly like a film director yelling "cut" on a set to fix the pacing of a scene in real time.
It really is.
It completely shatters the illusion that oral storytelling is just an accidental stream of consciousness. It is a highly crafted, deeply intentional art form.
And Bowles accommodated that instinct, He didn't impose external written order. He allowed the textual structure to adapt to Layachi's oral revisions.
Which is so cool.
Yeah, it shows that these sophisticated decisions about timing, memory, and pacing persist even when transitioning the spoken word into text.
And Layachi's careful crafting totally paid off. A Life Full of Holes ended up being a financial success.
Which was huge for him.
It was. And that directly sparked the interest of our final storyteller, Mohammed Mrabet. The success of one storyteller effectively motivated a return to the communal roots of the medium.
Mrabet's entry into this is such a great story of overlapping motivations. He literally saw Bowles walking around with a big machine with big tapes and a microphone.
I love that description.
Right, and motivated partly by the economic success he saw Layachi achieve, and partly by his own lifelong, just undeniable compulsion to tell stories, Mrabet asked to be recorded.
And he was so prolific, he recorded 27 stories in total, giving us collections like The Boy Who Set the Fire.
And Mrabet's stories are this beautiful hybrid of the two styles we just discussed.
So fantasy and realism.
Exactly. They resist a single narrative arc. They fluidly shift between gritty realism, sudden bloodshed, witchcraft, and deep psychological dreams.
Wow.
And Mrabet relied heavily on self-dialogue to rehearse his tales, meaning the boundary between his internal thought process and his external performance is incredibly porous on the page.
You can really see that fluidity in the story Baraka. It follows a character who keeps slipping into these vivid, surreal dreams whenever he naps in an orchard.
And how does the translation convey the feeling of a dream state? By using repetition.
Right.
The text repeatedly uses the word strange. It acts as a rhythmic drum beat throughout the whole passage.
Almost like a trance.
Exactly. That kind of repetition isn't just stylistic. It's a classic mnemonic cue in oral performance, used to anchor the listener's attention during a surreal shift in the narrative.
Mrabet doesn't just do the surreal, though. He dives deeply into the spiritual and communal traditions of Morocco, specifically the shrine culture.
Yes, the veneration of local saints or marabouts is a huge part of the cultural fabric, and he explores this beautifully in The Saint by Accident.
It's such a great premise. It's about a completely ordinary man named Bukuja who is just sitting by himself in a candlelit cave one day. And people passing by accidentally mistake him for a holy saint. So visitors start arriving in droves, bringing him offerings like coins and live chickens, desperately hoping for his spiritual blessing.
And what's fascinating is how Bukuja reacts, because he doesn't correct them.
He just rolls with it.
He eventually leans all the way in, he embraces the role, and begins speaking with the profound authority of folk belief. At one point, to solidify his status to his followers, he tells them, "Have faith, and you can sleep with snakes."
That is an actual Moroccan proverb, isn't it?
It is. Dirnya wabat M3A El Sevilla. It conveys the cultural belief that absolute pure faith offers protection even in the face of deadly danger.
Wow.
Yeah. And by embedding these traditional proverbs directly into the English text without stopping to over-explain them to the Western reader, the translation carries the heavy weight of oral tradition.
But if we really want to talk about carrying the weight of oral tradition onto the page, we have to talk about the story Balul. This is the ultimate example. It's a frame story, so a story within a story. It features a man named Balul who opens a cafe, and entertains his patrons with a wild tale about a Ghibli.
Which is a man from the countryside.
Right. And this Ghibli gets trapped in a room completely filled with angry bees.
And the escape plan is legendary.
It really is. How does he get out?
Well, the steps are wonderfully absurd. First, the trapped man eats a large amount of mezun, which is a potent cannabis paste.
Okay.
Then, he smokes a significant amount of kif.
Naturally.
Once thoroughly intoxicated, he strips off all his clothes, rubs sticky honey all over his entire body, grabs 2 empty pails, and simply walks right into the swarm of bees.
I just love the sheer absurdity of it. It's brilliant. But you mentioned earlier that the crucial detail of the story isn't the wild plot itself.
Right.
It's how the plot is delivered on the page.
Exactly. Because this is a story being told inside a cafe, the text actually includes the live audience reacting to Bolo. As he is building up the tension of the bee room, the patrons constantly interrupt him to guess the ending.
They are literally shouting out guesses. You read lines like, he opened the window, or he smoked them out.
And Balul is shooting them down in real time going, no, no, no.
And Bowles kept every single one of those audience interruptions in the final printed text. Again, without quotation marks.
Yeah.
So the voice of the narrator, the actions of the character with the honey, and the live shouting audience all bleed together into a single textual experience.
It perfectly preserves the feeling of actually sitting in a Tangier cafe, drinking mint tea, and participating in the real-time communal creation of a story.
It's like leaving the hecklers and crowd work in a stand-up comedy special. It proves the audience isn't just watching the art, they are part of the art.
They absolutely are.
So what does this all mean for us? When we step back and look at Yacoubi's fantasies, Layachi's brutal realism, and Mrabet's interactive cafe tales, what is the big picture here?
Well, the core takeaway is a profound redefinition of what translation is actually supposed to be. This deep dive shows us that untranslatability isn't a failure to find the correct English word in a dictionary. It is a triumph of preservation.
I love that.
Right. By breaking the standard rules of Western prose, by dropping the punctuation, by keeping the rhythmic, repetitive conjunctions, and by leaving the chaotic audience interruptions right there in the text bowls. Bowles didn't just translate a series of plots.
No, he built a textual time capsule for a vanishing oral tradition. He allowed the linguistic dissonance to survive. He kept the weird time signatures and the raw vocals. And that leaves you, listening to this, with something really important to chew on.
Definitely.
We've seen how standardizing a text, forcing it into fluent, expected grammar, can actually erase the unique rhythm and soul of spoken Moroccan storytelling.
It really makes you wonder about our own lives.
It does. As we increasingly communicate through highly standardized digital formats today, constantly leaning on autocorrect, grammar-checking algorithms and, perfectly polished AI-generated emails, what parts of our own cultural rhythms, personal quirks, and oral histories are we quietly erasing right now?
It's a sobering thought. I mean, in our rush for perfect fluency, we might be domesticating our own voices.
Keep the raw vocals, people. Let yourselves be a little untranslatable. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.